All right. I'd like to call the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order for Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Pursuant to ARS 38-43102, notice is hereby given to the members of the commission and to the general public that at this work session, the commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public. And we would go for legal advice and discussion with the commission's attorney on any item listed on the following agenda pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A3. And then I'd like to do roll call.
Carol.
Here.
Their whole name. Bob Harris. CJ Lucky.
Here.
Mary Norton.
Here.
Ian Sharp.
Here.
Megan Weller.
Here.
And just as an aside, I see that I'm listed as vice chair, and it should be chair, and Mary Norton should be vice chair.
I see that too. I think there's something wrong with the template. I'll have that fixed.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. So now I would open the floor to public comment. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within their jurisdiction or jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission today. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during this portion of the agenda. To address the commission on any item that is on the agenda, please wait for me to call for public comment at the time the item is heard. Is there any public comment? Is there any public?
I don't see any.
Is anybody online that we need to be aware of at this point? Okay, thank you. So then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes of our regular meeting on Wednesday, September 11th, 2024.
I move to approve the minutes from Wednesday, September 11th, 2024.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So it's been moved by Mary and seconded by Ian. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Excuse me, I can't pick up the paper. Then we'll go to public hearing. And item 5A is PZ 24-00010, the city's request for a zoning code text amendment to modify Division 10-20.50. Amendments to the zoning code text and zoning map to add required review timeframes for zoning map amendments, as well as updating protest procedures for zoning map amendments.
That's my report.
Okay, I'm done. You're done.
Just kidding. Tiffany Antal, zoning code manager. 2 weeks ago, we had work session. We went through these pretty in depth. So I'm just gonna stay high level. Try not to eat up too much of your time this evening. So again, this proposed amendment is the result of new legislation, and it requires us to review a zoning map amendment essentially with a 30-day administrative review time frame and a 180-day overall approval in the substantive realm. There was a small change as well to the protest procedures update, which removes government property from being included in the overall properties necessary to pursue that actual protest and a rezoning. And if you're not familiar with protest provisions and you want more information about it, let me know. But essentially, if a rezoning goes through and it comes to city council, if a certain percentage along a certain side based on that area comes forward, they can require a supermajority vote of the city council in order to approve that rezoning. I've had it happen to me once. I've also had that zoning case go down. Today we will talk about the findings, so we do need to make sure that we make findings. The text amendment does need to be consistent with the general plan and any applicable specific plan. It needs to not be detrimental to the public interest, health, safety, convenience, or welfare, and the proposed amendment needs to be internally consistent with other provisions of the zoning code. So we'll hit the first one, and that is, most of these planning documents don't really deal with process so much as they're dealing with the types and the where of development. And I'm trying to broaden this to not just the Flagstaff Regional Plan, but also when we go to council, we talk about what's in the 10-year housing plan as well as the carbon neutrality plan. So I'm gonna just start filling you in on that information as well, as to be as helpful as possible in your decision making. But essentially, there is a policy about establishing greater flexibility in development standards and processes. I don't know if this necessarily falls within that parameter. It sort of is, but it's definitely mandated by the state. And in that regard, it could potentially help facilitate the development of housing types. I think that's what the state legislature is going for, so I'm gonna jump on that bandwagon and say it's gonna do the same. I was recently I was at a conference last week, and we had a legislative update session, and there was a member there that had previously worked in New Mexico that had similar provisions applied. And he was saying they actually ended up denying a lot more zoning cases. So they would come in, they would get denied, turn around, restart the process all over again, just to make things work. So we'll see what happens. I'll keep my ear to the ground around the state and see how people are dealing with this. But, it'll be an adventure. Next up is not detrimental to the public interest, health, safety, and convenience. I mean, thankfully, the state legislature has decided that for us. So I would agree. I would agree with them that right now this is likely not detrimental. And internally consistent. So yes, we are being internally consistent. And yes, we are being internally consistent in the fact that we don't actually put timeframes in our zoning code, but we are currently required to add this timeframe into our zoning code. When we don't put them in the zoning code, that makes it easier for us to administratively change them. This one is specifically mandated, so it's fine. The other ones are kind of up to us to decide what those timeframes actually are. And lastly, staff recommends approval, and staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward this to the City Council with a recommendation of approval. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Mary?
I just happened to think of one question. With regard to when there's community meetings required through a rezoning, does that mean that squeezes that time frame down?
Yes, it does.
How do you see that working for applicants in community and neighborhoods and such?
The one really good thing about the way we manage rezoning cases is we require the applicant to submit at least their public participation plan in order to make their application complete. So we have that as a completeness guideline, so that would be fine. The meetings then have to be completed as part of that substantive review. So I would assume that staff's gonna stop the clock until the applicant gets that done. So that's gonna eat into the applicant's time and not ours. So it should be okay.
Are there any other questions? Yes. Oh, okay.
The only comment I'd like to make is that we're so supportive in Arizona of individual rights and I think the rights of the cities, but it really distresses me when the state comes in and sets timelines like this. So I'm voting for it because I don't want to cause trouble for staff, but philosophically, I don't think they should set timelines.
Okay. I'll definitely do my best to push those comments forward.
I would say ditto to that comment, because
Yeah.
that would be my comment as well, but we can't other than voting, we can't do much about the state legislature.
Well, we can all vote.
That's what I said, other than voting.
Yep.
We can't do much, so.
Yep.
Okay, is there a motion or any other discussion, I should say, or comments? Is there a motion?
Oh, motion, I'm just trying to figure out how to word it. I move that we approve the city's request to modify Division 20 dash, I'm sorry, 10
I'm
dash.
sorry. Here, let me bring it back up for you.
I have I do have it here on my iPad, but. All right, I will move that we approve the recommendation. Well, aren't we approving or we're just recommending to city council?
Recommending.
Okay, I move that we recommend to city council for approval the zoning code text amendment PZ 240010 zoning map amendment process
In accordance with the findings.
in accordance with the findings.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
CJ has seconded. Is there any other discussion? Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries, and thank you, Tiff, for your hard work on this. We really appreciate it. I know most of it was presented to us last time, but we'll move on to PZ 24000008, the city's request for a zoning code text amendment to amend section 10-20.30.050. And Tiffany, if you'd like to present again?
Thank you so much. I did for the screen call this miscellaneous, just because the title of this amendment is so long. That's why I called it miscellaneous here, because otherwise it wouldn't fit on the slide. But just as a reminder, we are going in and removing the requirement for a concept plan on a duplex. So we'll treat them the same as we treat single-family, and then we'll treat them the same as single-family outside of a legally recorded subdivision. We have modified and clarified our accessory structures standards. The biggest thing we did was fix that, that provision that said an accessory structure was limited to 160 square feet. That was the big substantive change. We clarified accessory uses, and we put back in the provisions for outdoor sales areas, which hopefully will be helpful. And in terms of home occupations, we aligned the allowable sizes with what the allowances are in the building code so that we don't run into an issue there in the future. And then the last two go hand in hand. We removed this section called basements, basement garages, building stem walls, crawl spaces, and podium parking structures, and added it into the architectural standards. So it gets deleted here, but it is incorporated in whole in the architectural standards. What that changes is the applicability of those provisions now apply to everything that our architectural design standards apply to, and that's duplex and above. So these provisions will no longer apply to single-family homes.
Tiffany, I need to interrupt just for a second. Bob Harris just joined us
Okay.
online, so I just want to.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, are you done presenting? I'm sorry.
Oh, the findings really quick, establish greater flexibility. It ends up being sort of the same policies here, establishing greater flexibility, consider creative policy and planning tools, amend the Flagstaff zoning code to facilitate development. Again, we're not anticipating any of these to be detrimental to public health safety. And lastly, it's internally consistent with the existing zoning code. We're actually fixing some things here. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission make a recommendation to the City Council for approval. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
So, I have a question. What do you think this will look like in the future then for new properties?
what will this look like in
Yeah.
the future? All of these this particular amendment?
Yes.
I think the most significant will be in terms of building stem walls and basement garages on single-family homes. We'll have a lot more flexibility to work with the individual home designers on especially steeply sloped properties and how their site may lay out and work. And we can leave architectural design on single-family homes up to the HOAs and the community design groups, which they're much more appropriate in that regard than we are.
So, I'll say, I don't know when it was, a month or two ago, when we looked at somebody who had a steep site and then that we had to approve the new driveway, we won't need to do something like that in the future, is that?
I'm not exactly sure what that
I
case
don't-
was. Alex, do you know? They had to approve a driveway?
Or
on the
it-
property?
wasn't it a driveway to, like, they moved the driveway from their original concept plan and because it was a steep slope? I may be remembering this wrong, but,
Right, that was
then-
a plat that we did where the building envelopes were adjusted because of driveways. I do not believe it was a result of the stem wall.
okay.
It was more just how steep of a driveway do you want going to your house?
Right,
And I'm not,
okay.
I think it was,
So
Fit it
that would
down
be
into the
something that we would still have to hear at planning and zoning or not with this new amendment?
Potentially. It's gonna be the rarity. But potentially if somebody wanted to come in and amend, especially an existing subdivision plat that had very specific driveway standards on it, you may still need to see something like that.
Okay,
the city used to have kind of associated with the building code, it had a specially adopted standard that limited how steep your driveway could be. And then that was not carried forward when we did the last code revision. I'm not sure if there's appetite to kind of bring that back when they update again, the next round of updates. So,
okay, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? All right, then I'd entertain a motion. CJ?
Okay, here we go. I make a motion in accordance with the findings presented in this report that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends to the City Council approval of zoning code text amendment PZ 24408, concept plan review, accessory structures, accessory uses, home occupations and basements, basement garages, building stem walls, crawl spaces, and podium parking.
I'll second it.
So it's been seconded by Mary. Is there any discussion? Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you, Bob. Anybody opposed? That motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. One more.
Yeah, so we'll move on to BZ 2400134, the city's request for a zoning code text amendment to modify section 10-40.60.030 for ADUs, and I'll let you go ahead and present again, Tiffany. Thank
Thanks
you.
so much. So this amendment has a lot of substantive changes in it, and each one of those are also guided by recent state legislation. Lots of community conversations happening around the state in regards to these provisions and what it really means. The one thing that I would tell you is while this allows folks to have two ADUs and all of those things, the reality of how much it costs to actually build an ADU is pretty extensive. That in and of itself, the actual cost to construct is going to be the limiting factor. So while I see this as a move towards wanting to see our housing supply extend, I don't see this necessarily being the end-all be-all of housing supply. And so I wouldn't be too afraid of these changes necessarily. Unfortunately, the folks that generally do have the money are the ones that generally short-term rental. But the good news is that if you short-term rental the ADUs, you need to be living in the house. And that's a great new provision. So I think that then becomes the limiting factor in that case. So good news, bad news, whatever. If I could build 8 ADUs to house all these wonderful people, I would. And they could all live in a commune on my property. That is my ultimate goal and plan. I want them all to come live at my house. Anyway, so what does this do? It allows more than one ADU. One of them would have to be attached, one would have to be detached. The size limitations change, 75% of the gross floor area or 1,000 square feet. We're gonna keep our 800 square feet as well, so both provisions are built in. Right now, we allow an accessory dwelling unit up to 800 square feet, regardless of the size of the home. So we wouldn't wanna take anything that was already built and make it legal nonconforming. So we're gonna keep this provision in as well. Just one of those. Mhm.
I just thought last time when you presented, it was 1,000, that you were going up to 1,000?
No, we are going up to 1,000.
Okay.
But it's that 1,000 is based on the size of your home. So your home would need to be basically 1,300 square feet. And we do have a very large supply of housing stock, especially in older Flagstaff where ADUs are more prevalent or more likely to be built, that are much smaller. And so we've been doing this for almost, 2007 till now, not quite 20 years, but an extensive time frame. So we don't want to take anything we've already built and make it grandfathered. Because when you do that, you then start to limit the types of improvements that can be made to those structures. So we're going to stick with both. People have the option. So even if their house is 1,200 square feet, they can still have that 800 square foot ADU. All right. Which I think they could anyway if you did the math, 75%. But I'm sure there's somebody who gets caught in the snafu. Anyway, this would allow the long-term lease of all of the units. And again, we already have this built into our code. We will allow you to long-term lease both the ADU and the single-family home as long as you agree to not short-term rental. This is basically staying in place. Because now to short-term rental, one of the ADUs, you need to live in the house. It does remove that parking requirement. This is gonna be, I think this is where the pressure you guys are gonna see. Someday you're gonna have to start making some hard decisions on parking, but I hope we have lots of good community conversation about what that looks like. I hope when the time comes, we bring you a comprehensive package that makes it easier for you to make those decisions. This does remove the architectural compatibility requirements. What I would tell you though is if you're in an HOA, the HOA requirements would still regulate. So, because an HOA can overrule us. That is a potential solution for some of the historic districts. They could always go back in and apply CCNRs or deeds restrictions privately on their properties. Because again, we can't provide provisions for historic districts. But there are some possibilities for them. It'd be a tough hurdle, but they could do it. And then we have to basically remove all of the restrictions for ADUs if they're more restrictive than the single-family dwelling, which we've done. And there is a reduced setback for the ADU, which we already have built into code as well. The biggest thing now is at this point, you can be closer on your side and rear setbacks if you keep to a 16-foot height limit. Now you could be closer to the rear and side setbacks but have the overall height of the same principal dwelling. Again, cost is going to be a factor with construction.
And refresh my memory that they have to be 1 story, is that correct?
Well, today they have to be 1 story. That will not be the case anymore. We won't-
Okay, so what if you have a duplex that's 1,200 square feet? Could you build an ADU
No,
on a
80
duplex?
no.
Okay.
ADUs are specific to single-family homes.
Okay, thank you.
They are only allowed on sites with single-family homes. And last up, it removes the requirement for a restrictive covenant. I'm actually kind of excited about this one because we make people record these covenants and it's cumbersome. And then there's this book of covenants that nobody knows what to do with. So I'm all for no more paper, but It's good. All these rules are codified. The only reason we did the covenants is that so a new buyer would know and understand the rules of the ADU. So findings, conformance with the regional plan, our regional plan, right there. Promote accessory dwelling units where appropriate is convenient. I don't- Where that is, I'm not sure, but I think the state has decided for us. And that we should continue to evaluate and amend, our housing plan says we should continue to evaluate and amend the current accessory dwelling unit zoning standards with the goal of increasing supply. Months ago, they started pushing on me about adding in second accessory dwelling units, and I said, yay, but here we are, faster than I ever thought we would be, so it happens. And carbon neutrality plan, create housing options, same. So I love that we are echoing one another amongst these plans. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes they end up in conflict with one another. But it's good to know we're at least, we've got some level of support from all three. And they're not anticipated to be detrimental to the public interest, health, safety, or convenience. We've dealt with the utility issues. And again, as long as these structures are built to code, my preference would be they all be required to have kitchens, because I think it's important that that housing stock have kitchens, but we'll keep pushing for it. And then lastly, it's internally consistent. We're just making modifications to our existing standards, and staff is asking for your recommendation to council of approval. And if you have any questions, be happy to answer.
Okay, so Mary has a question?
I don't know if this came up when we talked about it in our work session. What do they do, or did they give any guidance on utilities for each of the individual ADUs? Are they individual panels? Are they, how are they handling that?
So right now, our code requires that they, like the ADU, whether it's attached or detached, be on this same utility meters, so, or panel or whatever, so it all be tied to the same utility service. The one in working on this code provision, I did reach out to Water Services. That's the one that's probably, when you do a detached unit, it probably makes sense, and we've had requests in the past to have individual service. It also helps if it's a rental to be able to extend that charge to the tenants differently. So it does put you in a better position, and so we don't see a purpose or a reason anymore to force the issue. I think it can become an option, but essentially, if you're going to be attached to the principal home, or you're going to be interior, you're going to end up being on the same meter. If you're detached, you will have a separate water meter.
All right, any other questions? Yes, CJ.
I just have to make a comment again. On this one, I am going to vote no, not because I know that the state is going to override everything anyway, and it's going to happen here, but I just feel, having been on the board of the Townsite Community Land Trust, that the architectural compatibility requirements could cause a lot of trouble in our historic districts, where you could have a two-story building, doesn't look anything like the original building. So in good conscience, I just can't vote for this particular amendment to be forwarded to the city council.
And again, that would have been my question, is what is this going to look like if it goes into effect? I mean, what will that look like for some parts of Flagstaff?
I mean, I think the historic preservation aspect is going to be an adventure on how this really gets applied. I think we have to walk a careful line, and I'm kind of curious to see how some of the other communities are going to manage it. But the important thing to note is that those property owners always have the option of applying deed restrictions to their own properties. So when I did present to the Historic Preservation Commission on this, I did let them know, because there's another one coming, right? This isn't the only one. There's going to be another one within the next year that also has potential impacts. And so, you know, they could get started on working on those deed restrictions now. And there are historic communities that have already done it. They've outlawed short-term rentals as well. So there are possibilities, it'll be a little bit more work for them, but there are some options out there. And we'll see how creative we can get in doing our certificate of no effect and those parameters in terms of dealing with these outside of maybe some of that material compatibility component.
All right.
Just another
Mary
com-
has a
yeah, just
comment.
another comment. I mean, I will vote yes because of the requirement of the legislature and in supporting the amendment to be consistent with that. But I too just want to express that I share those same kind of reservations about architecturally, even with regard to the parking and the height of ADUs and such. You know, I do this begrudgingly to say, okay, we'll comply.
And I will ditto Mary, but I see other people have joined us online. And Bob, does Bob have a question or a comment?
Yes, I wanted to circle back around to that comment made earlier by Mary, kind of clarifying the multiple utility allowances. So if I understand it correctly, currently the city does require either attached or detached ADUs to still operate off of a single electrical meter. The new proposed provisions would allow for multiple electrical meters and also multiple water meters. If I'm understand that correctly?
Yes, for the detached, it's going to have to be a separate water meter.
Oh, have to be. Okay.
Yep.
And what about the electrical? Is that a,
The electrical, you'll have your choice. So we don't, I mean, we regulate the water service, so we can absolutely say that and mandate it. And that was per conversations with water services. But the electric, you could essentially have your choice. If you wanted to only have one electric meter, you could do that. Just trying to double check.
But it will allow two now. Because I've run into this issue before where the city has cited some NEC code that says that you have to have one primary service, even with a secondary unit. So this sounds like it might overrule that or contradict that or change.
I won't be able to overrule the building code, but utility service, an attached or interior ADU shall be connected to the same utilities as the primary single-family dwelling. Detached ADUs shall have a separate water meter. So I'm silent about electric and gas.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember when I was involved with Crestview, when they were building ADUs out there, and I remember that was one of the issues, is that there was only one single electric meter, and for those that wanted to rent, that was gonna be, you know, a little bit more of a hassle.
So there's nothing in this provision that's gonna prevent that. If there is something in the building code, then that'll be another subject we need to go tackle.
Bob,
Yeah,
did you
I
have,
believe there is.
Okay,
Yeah.
Bob, I'll get going on it. I'll go bug them.
Bob,
Yeah,
did
I
you have
think in
anything
the
else?
NEC there's, yeah, in the NEC, I believe there's 4 conditions to where it can be exempt. And so I guess if there was just a way to find, to be able to access one of those exemptions, then I think that would be workable.
Okay, I'll make sure I go bug Amy as soon as possible. But there's nothing in this
Great.
zoning code that's gonna prohibit it.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from community members? I don't know who we have online, but if you have any comments? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I will look to you for a motion.
I actually have a question.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So a couple of you have said that, I think philosophically you're opposed to this because of the state pushing this upon us. I guess, would you be in favor of this if this was something that we came up with on our own, the state didn't force this upon us?
For me, I would have wanted to have kept things like architectural guidelines to have consistency between a unit. I would have liked a little bit more leeway in having staff be able to discuss parking when there are potentially 2 extra ADUs on a lot, things like that. It would have been nice to have that be left to local jurisdiction.
So where I'm going with that is, I don't know that it's our role to recommend something that we don't think is appropriate just because the state tells us to. The city council that's their job, but we as a planning and zoning commission, if we don't feel it's appropriate, then it's not appropriate.
All right, so, can I entertain a motion from anyone?
For grins and giggles, I'll make a motion.
Okay,
Regarding PZ 2400134, I recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission, in accordance with the staff report, find that the required findings of the zoning code have been met, and that we move, or that we push this to, or that we recommend that the city council approve the zoning code text amendment.
is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I'll second.
I heard Megan first, so Megan seconded that motion. Is there any other discussion? Anybody want to, I mean, Ian brought up a point, if you want to discuss it. Not?
No, I appreciate the point, and I'll be voting no.
And I'll add that it bothers me that the state does push as much as they do upon the local jurisdictions. It's frustrating.
And I would agree with that statement, but I'm going to let that go to the city council for them to discuss. So,
And I think, I think we appreciate that, obviously, this will be passed. It needs to be passed. But I think by giving a no vote gives the opportunity for city council to acknowledge that we had a discussion. They'll probably maybe have a discussion, and it's more of a statement.
The other point to just, even if the city council chose not to approve it, it would happen anyway. That's the penalty provision written in the statute.
all right, thank you.
And it may give you fodder, Tiffany, as when you talk on a state level or with other states to say, these issues did become a bit of a sticking point for us.
Well, and it's also really helpful for me to hear your comments and your concerns, because as we move forward with other amendments, where there is flexibility or where there are conversations or where we can mitigate what the concerns are, that'll be really important.
And it just goes back to short-term rentals being forced upon us as well by the legislature. That, we might not have as much of a housing problem if we didn't, if short-term rentals could have been regulated by the city instead of the state.
Yes, last night at City Council, there was an update on the 10-year housing plan, and there's a lot of statistics. And I've been thinking about, every time I come in with an amendment, especially one in regards to housing, is bringing you some of those statistics. I mean, the one that caught my eye last night is residents here pay $854 per month more than the Valley for housing. That's per month. So, just important statistics to keep in mind as we move forward. And yeah, we have huge obstacles to overcome, and we have a lot of second homes. But I think the more data and the more information and the more feedback we get out of this community, the better off we're going to be lobbying at the state level for better legislation. And I hope they honestly learn some lessons from this time around, that they're not planners and they need planners. Sorry, hope somebody hears me out.
So, yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's, for me, the number one issue is affordable housing in Flagstaff, and that we have ADUs that can then be short-term rentals, even if the owners have to live in them. It still can be a short-term rental instead of, helping solve our housing shortage. And these are the things that they come up with, but then and they think that they're going to help with housing shortages around the state, and it doesn't.
The positive thing, though, is even if somebody has an ADU and it's used as a short-term rental, when we all know our preference, it be a long-term rental, it still helps that property owner make that mortgage payment. So there is still somebody, and there is still part of that housing. So I'm gonna look for the positive in every single angle I can find, as I bring these forward to you, but there is some realm of positive in everything. There will be somebody who benefits.
Thank you for that statement, but I still think that there are short-term rentals in our community where the owners don't live in the community, and so that money is not affording anybody any more housing in our community. So I'll just go on that statement. Unless there's any more discussion, anybody have any other discussion or comments? I will go for the vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
So
That motion fails.
I was just going to ask if that motion passes or
You'll need
fails.
to make the alternative motion now.
And
And
we-
it's okay if you still have a tie, I just need you to do it. for the
okay,
record.
and then do you need something from Megan about her statement of why she voted no?
I think for me, it comes down to who's going to build an ADU and at the expense of cost. I don't really think that somebody not making a mortgage payment, for that example, would then be able to build an ADU without some sort of incentive from the city. So I think that's what gets me hung up on it.
So I'll welcome you to the next presentation.
Wait. Do we have to have a negative vote on this, the opposite way?
Yes, yes, we need to.
Okay, so can I get a motion, preferably from one of the three of you, in the opposite direction? Mary, everybody's looking at you.
She does it so well.
Well, all right, I move that, I don't know that I've ever made a motion that's against something. That we do not recommend,
You make a recommendation that the city council deny zoning code text amendment.
thank you. I make a recommendation that the city council deny the zoning code text amendment PZ 2400134 for accessory dwelling units.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
CJ, is there any discussion on this motion?
Did we give you enough information to share our thoughts?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments? I will go for the vote. So when I ask if you're in favor of this motion, it's in favor that we send to council to deny, or that we don't send this to council at all. Is that correct?
No, it automatically goes to
Okay.
council.
So that we deny this? So all in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. I will. All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, so this motion does pass.
What was that vote? I
It was
missed
5 to 1.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh, thank you. And then is it Tiffany, are you still on board?
I'm done.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Tiffany, and thank you for answering all our questions and for all the work that you've done on this. We really appreciate it.
I'll be back in 2 weeks with more.
We're looking forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Okay. And then we'll move into general business. So A is a discussion on accessory dwelling units, the model plans pilot program. And I don't know who is from staff is. Oh, okay. There we go. You're
Hi.
online. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Planning and Zoning Commissioners and Chair. My name is Genevieve Pear3. I am with the Sustainability Office, and apologies for not being there in person, but I am here to present about a model plan pilot program. So it relates very closely to the work, the discussion that you just had. So I look forward to chatting about this And let me go ahead and share my presentation. And actually, let me figure out what screen is going on first. Okay, there we go. All right, share this one. Okay. All right, great. Well, thank you again for having me, and I'll just jump right into it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ADUs and adopted housing and climate goals. Tiffany already mentioned some of those, so I won't go into too much detail there. A little bit of background research. We did the data that we gathered to try to think about how to craft this program, an example of what another city's doing to create model plans for ADUs, some things that still need to be worked out, next steps, and then questions and comments. So I would love your feedback on this program, and I am going to ask if someone would like to volunteer to help to participate on the selection committee and help shape program development. So I don't need to go into this too much detail. Obviously, we just had a really big conversation about ADUs. I just want to clarify that this is focused on detached ADUs. So Tiffany did mention attached ADUs and then interior ADUs. So we're not focused on those. This is just those detached ADUs. And this is the slideshow just talks about a couple of what an ADU is. And again, they're in existing neighborhoods. We already talked about supplemental income and who's, whether they're short-term or long-term. So yeah, I don't need to go into that in too much detail, but just kind of that's what we're focused on, are those detached ADUs. And then Tiffany mentioned a couple of goals and policies from the 10-year housing plan and the carbon neutrality plan that the previous amendment that she just talked about in her presentation addresses. This one addresses a couple of other ones. So the 10-year housing plan has a couple of policies about pre-approved standard plans, as well as constructing and promoting net zero and net zero ready housing. And then the carbon neutrality plan talks about incorporating ADUs into existing neighborhoods, and then encouraging carbon neutral ADUs, as well as incentivizing more affordable housing units, ideally because they're smaller. And so those are some additional policies. And I also mentioned the one that Tiffany talked about evaluating and amending, and that's outside of the scope of this project, but very much related to other topics or other changes that are happening with the zoning code, obviously, as you just discussed. So I just want to talk a little bit about the background on why we are where we are and how we got here. So this project is a partnership between a bunch of different departments within the city of Flagstaff. So I'm in sustainability, but we have folks from planning, housing, and building safety who are all involved in this project. And one thing we wanted to do before we did too much work moving forward was to do a community survey, get some more data, learn a little bit more about ADUs in Flagstaff, and figure out what could we do to incentivize more ADUs being in Flagstaff. So last year, actually about a year ago, we had a survey open on the Flagstaff Community Forum. We got over 350 responses, which was really good. Just to kind of find out from homeowners as well as renters and owners who have ADUs versus those who don't, like, how are you using your ADU now? How much did it cost? If you don't have an ADU, what would incentivize you to build one? So things like that. And then we did a targeted survey for design and construction professionals, so folks who submitted building permits for ADUs in Flagstaff and who are just kind of in that design and construction community. And among those people, did a bunch of in-depth interviews with them to kind of talk this through, like how could this work in Flagstaff? And then also just looking at what other cities are doing. A lot of other cities are doing pre-approved model plans right now. So kind of can we learn from those cities and see what they did, what worked, what could work for Flagstaff, et cetera. So some of the big finding from the survey was that there are several barriers to building an ADU. Some of them are related to codes. I have a little asterisk mentioning some of the things people brought up in the survey, and also talking about the code update that Tiffany just talked about and you just voted on. And then there's some barriers, the cost of building an ADU. Obviously, Tiffany brought that up. That is the biggest barrier. Excuse me, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. So anyway, there's several barriers that people identified to building ADUs. I mean, some of them the city can do something about, and hopefully to reduce some of those barriers to make it easier for people to build an ADU. So things the city can do something about it is the cost of designing an ADU, finding someone to design an ADU, navigating the design and permitting process, as well as city permitting piece. So that's what we're focused on today. And just a little bit more from the survey, finding that earning additional rental income is the biggest reason why folks want to build an ADU, but also that ADUs, the same ADU wasn't always a short-term rental or a long-term rental. Some of them kind of varied between the two depending on the needs of the homeowners. And that several people said they built an ADU to help address the housing crisis in Flagstaff and provide additional living space, both for their own household or their renters, as well as family and friends to visit. So not all of them are short-term rented, although obviously many of them are. And then 50% of the homeowners who don't have an ADU who responded to the survey said they were interested in building one, but only 14% said they were likely to build one in the next 1 to 3 years. And among those, 68% preferred a detached ADU, and more than 50% said they thought pre-approved model plans would help make it easier to build an ADU. There was also a desire for many different types of sets of plans to meet the diverse homeowners as well as ADU dwellers' needs. And then moving on from the design and construction professionals that I talked to and who responded to the survey, there was support for this if they can retain ownership and charge a reasonable fee, like a reuse fee for the use of their plans, which would allow the designer to work with the client to make sure that an ADU fits on the site and it's properly oriented, as well as helping the client navigate the city building permit and review and approval process. They also mentioned that ADUs are a good candidate for all electric and sustainable construction features because of their small size and the cost savings from not installing natural gas infrastructure. And then wanting to include pre-approved options to minimize the need for custom plans. So based on all of that data, we kind of coalesced around wanting to create an ADU model plans library. So basically to get a growing inventory of pre-approved all electric and energy efficient ADU model plans. With the goal to ultimately increase ADUs in Flagstaff by simplifying the process and reducing the cost to design and permit ADUs, as well as increase the awareness of ADUs in Flagstaff, as well as the potential benefits to both homeowners and renters, and connecting interested homeowners with design professionals and other ADU resources. And really the goal here is to be a win-win for the Flagstaff community as well as the design community. So for the public, someone who's interested in building an ADU, ultimately the goal is to have this help there be lower and more predictable design costs, lower building permit review fees because it will have already gone through building permit review to make sure it meets building codes. So when someone submits a plan, it would basically just be making sure it fits on the lot and it meets any other relevant design standards. Also allowing the public to preview plans for free before they select a plan, making it easier to find a designer, meeting energy efficiency goals and our adopted carbon neutrality plan, and ultimately making it easier and a little bit cheaper to build an ADU in Flagstaff. And then having the design community benefit from that as well. So being able to reuse plans in different locations, retaining ownership of their plans, and being compensated for people using their plans as well. And also having a lower time commitment to use plans they've already made to allow them to work with more clients. So that's really the goal, is to be a win-win for everybody in this case. So I mentioned a bunch of other cities have done model plans libraries. So the city of Tucson is probably the farthest along in Arizona in terms of ADU model plans, but the city of Phoenix has an ongoing contest that's actually open right now to get ADU model plan designs. And there's a bunch of other cities across the United States, actually. These are just a few of them, that this is kind of a pretty common thing that cities are doing to try to incentivize ADUs being built within their jurisdictions. So this is just an example from the city of Tucson's ADU library. They held a design contest earlier this year, so they're kind of still developing it, but this is what it looks like, where the public can basically preview plans and click on it, look at the floor plan, look at the elevation, see how much it costs, and then select that plan to say contact the designer, and then they work with the designer to get access to those plans. So that's basically what we want to do here in Flagstaff. So right now, where we are in the process, pretty early, we've done a lot of research, a lot of background stuff. We're almost ready basically to finalize kind of the design requirements, selection criteria, and working on finalizing the selection committee. I'm going to be drafting a request for informal proposals, or RFIP, that will be coming out later this year. And after that, basically soliciting designs and selecting designs from a selection committee comprised of design and construction professionals, community partners, and city staff. Once winners are selected, then they submit full construction plans for pre-approval. So basically those will be pre-approved model construction plans that we can then upload a preview of into that model plans library, and then have the public be able to view and select plans and work with the designer to submit a building permit using the plans. And then at the end, kind of doing a program evaluation. So again, this is a pilot program, so we're gonna see how it goes, but done a lot of research and hope and learning from people we've talked to within the community as well as what other cities have done. So just some things that are still being figured out that we're going to have that selection committee help advise upon, is kind of making sure we finalize what design criteria and categories we're looking for, awards, fees, and schedule, our kind of the whole design submission review and selection process. Moving through that building plan review process, just figuring out how we want to make the library look, and then program evaluation and next steps. So those are kind of high level things that are still being figured out. So yeah, I'm really here today to just see if anyone from P&Z is interested in working on this project, or let's say volunteering to participate on the selection committee where you would advise on some of these topics. So I'd love it if anyone's interested, that would be wonderful. And then if you have any questions or comments, I'm very happy to take any feedback you have at this time. Thank you.
So thank you for your presentation, and thank you for making it so that we can read it from where we're sitting. That, it's, I'm usually squinting to try to figure out what you're presenting, but I really appreciate the size font you use or whatever. Anyhow, it's,
Thank you.
can you tell us what you think will be the weekly, monthly commitment for somebody who's volunteering to participate on the
Sure.
committee?
Yeah. So for now, I'm going to be sending out an email to everyone and kind of getting some feedback through email. I may have one meeting between now and when this opens to get feedback, and then have another meeting once the plans are submitted to select the plans. So at that point, that will be more of a commitment, so that the people on the committee will need to review the plans against the selection criteria and score them, and then participating in a meeting to share their results. So that part, that'll be probably in December. So that part will be a bigger lift in terms of work. For now, it's not too much between now and then. I don't know, maybe the total hours, maybe 10, I would say. That might be high, but I don't want to undersell it as well.
So basically, you're not having a lot of meetings. People are working on their own to look at the plans and review the plans. And
Yeah, and I think, and just to clarify, before that, I will be reaching out via email to ask questions and get some feedback, but not everyone has to respond to everything. So, but yeah, there won't be very many meetings. I would say a maximum of 2 this year, and maybe a program evaluation meeting sometime in 2025.
Okay, and I know that I would be interested, but I'd like to see whoever else would be interested in this. So CJ, you're interested? Okay, and Mary, you'd be interested too, so I think anybody else? Okay, so Ian, and so almost everybody is interested in this, so I think we have to figure out who would be I know Mary serves on a committee, and CJ, you serve on another committee. So to me, it would be more open to the people who aren't already serving on another committee. So Alex, you have
Well, and Bob has his hand raised, so.
oh, I'm sorry. And Bob?
That's for a question. I'm already on another
Okay.
committee, so I don't know if I can commit to another one.
I mean,
Okay.
honestly, if it came down to that everyone wanted to play a role in this, I would think that we could do something where we're just posting a possible quorum, but it gets a little tricky. I
Right.
think that as long as we stay at 3 or less, then we wouldn't have that quorum issue.
Okay. So that would, I don't know if you want that many people, Genevieve?
I think I would say up to 2, because I was on the Housing Commission, and they 2 people wanted to participate, so that's totally fine. So I think if there's 2 people, that would be great. And I'll just say, in terms of what I could use the most help with at this point, is finalizing the design criteria, as well as making sure that these are buildable and constructible and likely to be deployed in Flagstaff. So kind of having that So I think that would be really helpful if anyone has thoughts or expertise on that. But again, like, I'm really excited that so many people want to participate.
So-
That's really encouraging. So thank you.
So to encourage, I would back out of that and ask Megan and Ian to serve on that committee, if that would make sense, if the two of you would agree to do that. I think that would be really great.
I think it'd be nice too, because there's so much interest from the commission, that maybe we ask Genevieve to come back at some point and present, you know, the top 10, or give sort of a talk about, you know, these are the criteria that my group has chosen, and do you have any feedback? I'll kind of leave it up to Genevieve as to what might be more helpful, but if we're open to having her come back and have additional conversations with the larger group, then everyone gets to feel like they have a part and they get to have some feedback on this, so.
I think that's a great idea, Genevieve, if you're willing to do that. And I think that Megan and Ian will serve us well on that committee as well. So if that
Okay.
works for everyone, yeah, that would be
Okay.
my suggestion, is Ian and Megan serving on that.
Wonderful.
So, yeah, okay, so then we'll open it up for questions. I'm sorry, Mary? Bob, if you want to go first?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for that, Genevieve. I had two questions that I don't think were answered or were deduced from this, but I'll just ask them anyway. My first one is if there is a model plan that is used, would the applicant still be required to pay the plan review fee for that plan, or would that be waived because those plans were already pre-approved?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. That's a great question. So we will be paying the initial plan review fee for any of the plans that are selected through the request for informal proposals. So therefore, when someone selects a plan from the public and says, I want to put this ADU on my property, they pay like a very, very, very reduced plan review fee. They don't pay the larger fee. So we will have paid that already. So they wouldn't be paying that fee. So it would make the building permit somewhat cheaper because we will have already paid that fee.
Okay, so in essence, they'll just be submitting like a site plan and then notating that, hey, we're going to put model 355 in here, and that's already been approved.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, as a builder who does build ADUs quite often, I'm curious, would I be able to have my own models that I build and have those pre-approved and set up as a model plan that I use for when I build on my different properties?
So yes, I mean, so we have the RFIP, so you're welcome when it's open to submit to that. You know, we're still figuring out what happens after the RFIP, if we hold another art contest or if we are able to open up the plans library for future submittals. Really, the goal is to get the largest amount of plans possible, just to increase the variety and the options available to the Flagstaff community, as well as increase the number of designers who have plans on the library. So I would say if you have pre-approved plans and you're interested, then definitely, you know, keep an eye out for the RFIP.
Let me clarify. What I was proposing was that me as a builder have my own model ADU plan that I use that's not available to the public, but I can submit it initially as a model plan like I would if I was building a model home, where it's gone through the plan review process, it's approved. When I want to go build it again, I just submit the site plan and the permit fee, but not have to pay for the full plan review fee on the same ADU.
Genevieve, I think I can help answer that. Bob, I believe the answer is yes, that you can absolutely submit something as a model plan, and then anytime you use it, you're just submitting a site plan. I would reach out to building safety and see what their process is, as well as if there's any expiration dates, because I think timing is going to be key on that. And so that would be my advice. And if you need that contact information, just follow up with me afterwards.
So I have utilized that process for single family homes, and they do expire once the new code is adopted, and they have to re-review that under the new code. So I guess ultimately what I'm asking is, will this same policy be able to be applied to ADUs as well as single family homes?
And I believe the answer is yes, but I would just
Okay.
confirm with building safety. But my understanding is that right now, a contractor, for example, can submit permits for an ADU as a model plan and then be able to use that as a model on multiple sites.
Okay. That was my question, yeah.
But I think, Bob, what you were asking was that it's just your plan, you're not putting it in the library, is that correct?
Yes. That was also my question.
So Alex, did you answer that question? So Alex says that was the answer to that question, so yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, Bob, did you have anything else?
No, that would be it. Thank you.
Okay, then Mary?
Yeah, first I just wanted to say I'm super excited about this because I'm just a huge proponent of pre-approved plans as I follow news in the building industry throughout the country. This is just the way to go, and I think could solve a lot of issues, not only with the ADUs, but with just smaller builders that just need to, have the ability to build, but need pre-approved plans, that would work. And I was curious, and maybe this kind of tags on to a little bit of what Bob was asking too, where there have been ADUs built throughout the city, either by, a builder like Bob has done, or the larger builders, or just an individual homeowner. And those have obviously, they're pre-approved, they're in your system. Is there any way that those have been called up to be used as future example plans, or do you absolutely need a builder and a designer attached along with that plan to make it part of this library?
Yeah, so thank you, Commissioner Norton. I don't know if there are many ADU model plans in our system already. I know there's a ton of single family model plans. I'm not sure if there's anyone has submitted ADU plans, but obviously Alex did mention that there is a process that we have already for reviewing ADU model plans, so there's no reason why we wouldn't have, we already have a process for single family model plans. So they're kind of using that process for these ADU model plans, and the whole goal of the library is to kind of make those available to the public, which isn't quite what Bob was talking about. But anyway, so we have a process there. So for this RFIP, if someone already has a plan that they want to submit, they're welcome to submit that in response to that request for informal proposals. And at this point, there's no contractor required to be attached to that. So it's really the designer, a draftsperson, submitting those plans available to the public. Those are definitely in my interviews and in the survey with design professionals. That's a question that folks had, like, what about contractors and what role do they have here? I think we're just starting with the plans library as a first step, and see how that goes and figure out in the future, what do we do with contractors? Obviously, some contractors have plans already, but a lot of designers are just designing them and don't have a contractor attached. So at this point, it's just the plans that are going to be in the library, and we'll reevaluate next year and see where we go after that.
So like all the ADUs that were built out, like at Timber Sky and Crestview and Juniper Point, and some of those are attached, I get that. There were a good handful of detached plans that were offered to buyers, and by those types of builders. Have they been contacted to be potentially using their plans, and wanted to touch on that?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Norton. I did forget about those ones. You're right, there are a couple of detached ADU plans in our system. So really they have been contacted. They did fill out the survey. Some of those builders, Capstone, they did respond. And yeah, when we open up the RFP, we're going to reach out to as many folks as we can just to let them know, hey, if you have plans, like please consider submitting to this library, and really just try to get as many folks to submit as possible so that we have the largest plan library. So we will be reaching out to as many folks, large builders, small builders, really whoever's interested. Yeah, so that's kind of the goal there. I hope, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? CJ?
My question is about the number of models that are two-story that you're seeing.
So we don't have any models yet, since we haven't opened up the design contest. So I think that is something that we need to work with the selection committee on to finalize that criteria and figure out what are we looking for, especially given with these ADU code updates that Tiffany, that you just discussed right before me. So I don't have an answer for you yet, because we haven't finalized the design criteria.
CJ again, and then after CJ, Megan.
Yeah, my concern is because I live in Lower Greenlaw, and I would say 80% are one-story homes, but the ADUs that come in that are two-story, they're looking right down into all these homes. So if there is a design criteria, my hope would be that they're designed so that I don't have 5 ADUs around me looking into my backyard, which is possible right now.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback.
And I think we discussed at the last meeting that there's no regulation that says they can't look in your backyard or your bedroom window. So, sorry, I digress. Megan?
What's the anticipated cost for a pre-approved plan, and does that money go 100% to the designer, or is the city getting some of that money?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we don't have a cost yet, or anticipated cost, but we are looking to set a cap for the reuse price, the reuse fee that designers can charge. So that's one thing we're still figuring out, what's a reasonable amount, and does that relate to the size? For example, maybe the fee would be a little bit smaller for a studio versus bigger for a 2-bedroom. So that's one of the things we're still figuring out, but that is something that we are looking to do, but cap it at something that is reasonable, that does cover designers' costs for working with clients to make sure that plan works in that property. But that fee would go 100% to the designers. So the city wouldn't be, city's not involved in sort of any of those transactions. Really, the library is just a place to host designers' plans. And then if the public wanted to look at a plan or potentially use a plan, they would contact the designer directly. So really, it's just a library. So the city wouldn't be involved in that part at all.
Okay, is there any other comments or questions? Ian?
I just want to follow up on that one. And Megan asked the question I think I was going to ask, but I just want to clarify. So if a designer has a plan, some plan in this library, they're going to agree to only charge some amount of money for that plan. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that makes sense.
Any other comments or questions? Good question. All right. Thank you so much, Genevieve. And actually, we look forward to hearing from you again in the future after some meetings have happened and that you could present before us in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Chair Randino, I
Yes.
want to point out, we have a member from the public who's in the meeting. He really wanted to speak on Tiffany's ADU code amendment, but there was a problem with the link. I think I have it up and working now, but I told him if he could wait for Genevieve, that we'd love to hear his comments on it.
Okay, thank you. So I can't see who's online, so I don't know your name, but if you will give us your name and address for the record, and then does he have the 3 minutes? No, whatever time he wants. So if you give us your,
Within reason, please.
yeah,
Tyler.
don't go on for an hour, but Your name and address to start with. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Tyler Denham. I'm a resident of Southside at 538 South Fontaine Street. As Alexandra said, I had hoped to join earlier to give public comment in favor of the ADU ordinance, but the Teams link was broken, so I had to email Alexandra. While watching the live stream on YouTube, I saw that the commission recommended denial, which is disappointing to myself. The requirements set out by the state bill are minimally different from Flagstaff's, the biggest one being the removal of parking requirements, which research shows is a definite poison pill for ADU construction, and is something that the carbon neutrality plan and the 10-year housing plan already noted that needs to be reevaluated. I think ADUs are a great way to add naturally affordable housing to existing neighborhoods. And the city has already stated in several places that it wants to boost ADU construction. And that's what this ordinance will do. So while I do empathize with the commission's concerns about preemption, I don't agree with recommending denial of a good ordinance to make a statement. I think the bigger question is, how did the state beat us to these changes? Why, as a city, had we not already made these changes? And that's all. And thank you for your time and thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your comments. At this point, we just thank you for your comments, and I don't think we have discussion on it. We've already,
And I would just encourage him to speak at council when
Yeah.
the item goes before council.
okay, thank you. All right, any other business? Is there any other miscellaneous items to and from commissioners?
I have none.
Anybody else? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned at 5:17, which is a lot shorter than I thought it'd be. Thank you.